Alrighty then guys, I'm back with part 3 of the Memory series, where I share my personal story of how I started World of Warcraft, and some of the hopefully interesting or funny adventures in it. In the last episode, we talked about most of the alts I dabbled in. I remade that undead mage, I leveled a hunter, and I got him a totally awesome hunter weapon, got some angry whispers because of it, and just had a good time in general. I'm sad to say that my hunter didn't make it too far after that. I think I stopped in the low 20s. I put my focus back on my paladin and was steadily leveling him, with the ultimate goal of course being level 60. In episode 1, if you remember, I talked about how I leveled to the mid 40s as holy spec, but with a DPS mindset. This got me into many dungeon groups, which was fortunate for me, and unfortunate for my group mates. And you know I say that, but I really just sort of blended in back then. Hey, the game was still new, everyone sucked. Some were a little worse off, but with good teamwork and persistence, it was doable. I mentioned my 3 friends in part 1, and that was Zarg, Maver, and Liquid. I met them in my friends guild, the one who got me into the game in the first place. I think I met them in a dungeon, I want to say. Our first one was Gnomeregan, I believe, which was level 30 back then. It took many hours because that place was a maze. Remember, there were no dungeon maps back then, and this place was like the granddaddy of labyrinths, especially for its level. It was originally going to be a city, but it was scrapped at the last second because they didn't have a mirror for the horde, and they didn't want to make things uneven, so that sort of explains why it's such a huge place. There was even an elevator that connected it to Ironforge. I think Haven Games has a video about that if you want a tour. I'll have a link to that in the description if you're curious. So, it took forever because the place was a maze, and we probably just died a lot too. A big problem with this place was this ramp to the final boss because there are enemies in this crevice, and if someone stood too close to the ledge, they would aggro, but their pathing would take them all the way up the ramp and drag everything with them. It was rough, and I remember it happening a lot from people standing on the ledge, a hunter pet, or just a rogue AoE, such as Consecrate, maybe. But we pushed and pushed, and hours later, we had conquered Gnomeregan. It was like the end of Terminator 2, except instead of killer androids, it was leper gnomes, and instead of the Earth, it was Azeroth, and instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was just 5 dorks with nothing better to do with their time. But we finished it nonetheless, and I guess they were impressed by my holy skills, so they'd invite me to more. They eventually left their original guild to make their own, and I joined them since we were pretty good friends at that point, and I didn't play with my high level buddy too much because he was busy running high level stuff. Our guild was Has a Posse, so our names would show up as Maver has a posse, Zarg has a posse, and so on. It was pretty silly. But we'd run the Scarlet Monastery, I think. Moradin was a popular one. Honestly, it's been a while, so it's hard to remember. Lots of stuff in the 30s to 50s range. Once I hit the mid 40s though, I actually became a bit more useful because I went to the Retribution spec and threw on a 2-hander. And that's because I got an epic 2-hander from the Ogres in Tanarus in one of the ruins there called King the Decapitator. Or at least that's what I told my friends. I actually just bought gold on good old eBay and took a trip to the auction house. Nowadays, you can actually just buy gold using the official Blizzard sanctioned WoW token, but back then you had to visit third-party websites. And there was a big stigma with it. Looking back, it was pretty dumb of me, but hey, I was pretty dumb back then. Not much has changed, huh? So, after 14 years nearly, I've come clean. May the gods have mercy on my soul. I didn't go unpunished though. I remember getting a 3-day ban, I think, so I got my just dues. At least I think that's what it was for. I wonder what things would be like if that was it for me. If I wasn't into it so much and I didn't come back, this channel wouldn't exist and you wouldn't be hearing this right now. Maybe I would have focused more and became an astronaut, a president, or a porn star. Okay, back on track here. I switched to Retribution, finally started doing some damage, and was more useful in general. I still healed though. That's something that I look back quite fondly in vanilla, was how often you'd see hybrid specs. Healers that would pick up aggro and tank if the main tank died, DPS who could switch to heals and cover the healer every now and then, and so on. Now, was it optimal, and did you see it in high-end rating? Not really, but it was still pretty cool. I was damage and healing, and I would help out the healer when they were out of mana, or people were low on health in general. It was a cool and useful thing to have, in the dungeon scene at least. So, we'd run dungeons together all the time, and it was my preferred way of leveling over the normal questing routine. Remember, I came from the Star Wars galaxy, so I didn't mind doing anything grindy, and I actually liked doing it. Although I of course liked questing too, it was always welcome. One of my favorite dungeons though that we ran so many times was a sunken temple, and I know a lot of people aren't going to believe that because it wasn't the most popular. That's because that place was a true maze. If you thought that Gnomeregan was bad, you haven't seen anything. The sunken temple, in my opinion, was the most confusing dungeon, and I argue that even to this day with my friends. Even worse than the Blackrock Depths, which is bigger, I'll give it that, but it's way easier to navigate and remember what hallways lead where, in my opinion. And, to back me up, Blizzard even removed it because it was so confusing. That's right, the sunken temple that you know now is not the true sunken temple, or the Temple of Atal Hakar as it's formally called. This area with the green dragonkin and the undead trolls is just a small portion of the whole dungeon, and if you look down this grating in the middle, you'll see that there's another floor down there, which is known as the lower side, which contained more bosses, several floors, and even a puzzle. The actual dungeon was insanely confusing because everything looked the same. In other dungeons, everything is distinct for the most part, and you can use your minimap a little to navigate it. But in the Sunken Temple, it's just green stairwells and hallways leading to green stairwells and hallways. And the minimap is next to useless because it's multi-layered and you can never tell where exactly you are. It was a labyrinth where part of the difficulty was just figuring out where the hell you were, and that's why I liked it. A dungeon in the truest sense of the word, and it's a shame that it's not in the game anymore. I can understand it not being in the Dungeon Finder because people would just get lost, but I don't see why they had to completely bar access to it even outside of the Dungeon Finder. We ran it many times and eventually mastered it, and it was one of our biggest achievements early on before we started raiding. Speaking of which, let's get into that and how that whole process started. Our first raid, unbeknownst to us at the time, was actually the Lower Blackrock Spire because, remember, this was technically a raid back then, although it was 15 people max initially, I think. What we wanted to do was the Blackrock Depths, and we knew that it was in the Blackrock Mountains somewhere, but we got turned around and somehow ended up in the Blackrock Spire rather than the Blackrock Depths. And we were like, damn, this place is tough. We were only level 50-ish, which is why we wanted to do the Blackrock Depths, since I think it was around that range, and the Blackrock Spire was 55 to 60 I believe, so it didn't go so well to say the least. One of the side effects of not having those handy instance portals on your map, I guess. But when we actually found the correct dungeons, we mainly did them on our way to 60, and they hit the cap a little before me. I was always a level or two behind them. I hit 60 doing my normal thing of just straight up grinding mobs. This time, it was those yellow worm things in the Eastern Plagueland zone. I did screenshot my final level, but unfortunately, the computer that I originally played on is long gone, which is a huge shame because I had so many screenshots from level 1 to 60 and even beyond. Hundreds probably, and they would be perfect for these videos. I really want to be able to show them to you, but unfortunately, these dramatic reenactments will have to do. So, I dinged 60 on some random worm in the Eastern Plaguelands. I think everyone remembers their first max level. As you know, in Star Wars, there really wasn't a finish line like this. There were no levels, and the closest thing you could compare it to is grinding out the specific combination of templates that you wanted to grind out, which, if you were hardcore enough, you could finish in under a week, and there was no real finality to it since you could unlearn anything you want and build a new template. Very different from the linear leveling style of World of Warcraft, and reaching this finish line and getting my last talent point was like, damn, now what do I do? I asked my friends that, and they said the max level dungeons because that's where you get your class sets. Well, that sounded good to me. The stuff that those people in the city were wearing, I can actually look like I have my stuff together instead of this random mishmash of leveling gear. Sign me up. Kinda funny to think that today, I prefer the clown suits like this as my transmog over the orderly sets in the game. So, that's what we did for a while. High level dungeons such as Skullomance and Stratholme, and I didn't even know that raids existed at this point, so this was my endgame. I got quite a few pieces of my Lightforge set, but I never completed it. It's hard to remember, but I was definitely missing the shoulders because I wanted those the most, and I remember my buddy, Liquid, who was also a paladin, he got the whole set, and I was pretty jealous. My buddy Zarg, who was the warrior, got a full set of Valor I think, and our healer, Maver the Druid, got Wildheart, so they were good to go, and I was just a few pieces short. But I had fun, so that's all that mattered. We ran dungeons every day, and I made some really good friends. When I was talking earlier about how different my life may have been had I not returned from my suspension, and honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I met so many people, as you'll see in the coming videos, that I really consider as true and close friends, even to this day, nearly 14 years later, and if I didn't come back, I wouldn't have my YouTube channel where I've made even more friends, and I get to share my stories with people like you who are kind enough to give me the time out of your day so many times. So, we are the posse. We weren't the best by any means, but damn, did we have some fun. But one day, after a week absence, I log in and say hi to my friends, and the guild was empty with just me left. What happened? Find out on the next exciting episode of Mad Season Ball Z.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.